Welcome, I'm Nina Gryphon, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel. Today we'll talk about the astrology of June 2023. It's our monthly forecast. First off, I wanted to say thank you to all of my patrons. I appreciate all of your support. If you would like to become a patron and get early access to astrological and magical content, you can go to patreon.com/Nina Gryphon. At the highest tier, you can join the Magus tier, and this gives you access to my monthly ebook called Magical Elections, which tells you how and when to make astrological talismans each month. So let's talk about the overarching themes for June. Generally, it's going to be a very strongly economically and business-focused theme with aspects strongly focused on financial activity. I think that a great deal of the acrimony and tension that we saw among major players in May has now dissipated, and instead people are now playing nicer, and some of that may even trickle down to us regular people. Now, generally, I would say that June is a month of respite, and we won't see May's levels of drama probably until we get to the eclipse season in October, which even so I expect to be less bad than we saw in April and May. When we look back at May, there were really a number of challenging themes. Last month, we had a really difficult lunar eclipse and also a regular new moon in the second half of the month that was also quite unpleasant. Mars entered a new sign, Jupiter squared Pluto, with Mars making a hard aspect to Jupiter and Pluto in close succession, and really at the end of the month. So we saw a lot of tension, a lot of difficulty, certainly in the United States. A lot of that was reflected in the debt ceiling debate. Now looking forward to June. Week 1, very first day, June 1st, we get Jupiter conjoining the North Node at 3 degrees Taurus. This is a combination that increases Jupiter's qualities. Remember that the North Node is a modifier. It's basically a giant plus sign that increases the energy of whatever conjoins it. Now, this can indicate very good fiscal news, as Jupiter is the planet of wealth and capital in general. The markets are likely to go up around this date, and the mood is optimistic. Interestingly, I've been studying a lot of Vedic astrology over the last several years. Some of you know I also now use it in my natal consultations, the life path consultation. So I also looked at it from a Vedic perspective, since the North Node is so important in Vedic astrology. And interestingly, that interpretation is far less positive, but note that it doesn't really conflict with the Western take. It just shows another side of this combination. It's known as the Guru Chandala Yoga. Guru is the Sanskrit term for Jupiter, and Chandala in Sanskrit is the person who collects and cremates the bodies of the dead, a so-called unclean occupation. Now, there's a lot to unpack there from a social perspective, but let's leave that aside for now. This combination is negative for Jupiter, who is harmed by Rahu's presence, and generally indicates that some of the blessings of Jupiter are thus tainted or harmed. The North Node is considered negative in certain ways. So in the mundane context, it could indicate financial markets rise, but there is a hidden cost or something bad had to occur for that gain, that money is particularly tainted or unclean, if you will. Now also in week 1, June 3rd, we get a full moon at 13 degrees Sagittarius in Washington, D.C., and therefore impacting the U.S. as a whole. This full moon is on the cusp of the 11th house when we use Placidus houses. Now, this is the house of governmental funds, as it is the second from the 10th of government. The ruler of the lunation is Jupiter, who is still less than a degree away from the North Node, just about half a degree away. So the emphasis in this chart is strongly on wealth and capital, and it's also in the 3rd house, so this is all about mass media and therefore communication about money and the markets, and the way communication moves the markets. Note that Jupiter still squares the Mars-Pluto opposition, which is separating, but it is right on the ascendant-descendant axis, Mars and Pluto, so we are getting echoes of the intense debt ceiling negotiations that will continue to reverberate for the next 2 weeks at least, while this full moon is in effect. Also, note that the lunation being in the Gemini-Sagittarius polarity suggests a specifically U.S. focus for the events of this full moon, as the U.S. does resonate to these signs, Gemini in particular. Now in week 2, June 4th, Mercury will conjoin Uranus at 20 Taurus. We're going to see some kind of unexpected or shocking revelation come to the fore, perhaps something to do with politics, education, students, young people, and so on, which are all mercurial indications. It's not the strongest mundane combination because Mercury is a fast-moving planet, but it's worth keeping an eye out for, see how it manifests. On a personal level, it's not a great combination for very stable, even, and calm communication. Now, June 5th, Venus will enter Leo and oppose Pluto at 0 Aquarius. Venus is not strongly dignified in Leo, but she is very magnetic and captivating, as she is in all the fire signs. It's a shift from Venus in romantic and dreamy Cancer, to this very bombastic Leo. She will be in Leo until early October because she will go retrograde while in Leo in July without changing signs the whole time, so we get a lot of time with Venus in Leo. We will discuss Venus retrograde in Leo in a future video, but for now, know that she will make a significant impact on individuals with key planets in late Leo, as that is where she will station retrograde next month. Venus, of course, has everything to do with women, the LGBTQ community, the arts. All of these things are going to undergo extreme scrutiny and take on additional power as well. Week 3, June 11th, Pluto will re-enter Capricorn. Now, Pluto is retrograding into Capricorn and will spend the rest of 2023 there. In early 2024, he will enter Aquarius for good. Unlike some astrologers, I don't consider this last bit of Pluto in Capricorn an indication that the movement we've seen with Pluto going into Aquarius as held back or going back. Those dominoes, once they're pushed over and have begun falling, there are no take-backsies once Pluto enters a sign, even though he might just enter that sign briefly, as we saw Pluto enter Aquarius for only about 3 months this spring. June 11th, Mercury will enter Gemini. Mercury entering his diurnal domicile is very favorable and certainly promises a livelier time than the 2.5 months he spent in Taurus, which were much more demure, much slower. Certainly Taurus is a fixed sign. Mercury was going retrograde. Mercury is going to be fast in Gemini, and he's good for commerce, studies, communication, but also very good for studying the occult arts. June 17th, Saturn will turn retrograde at 7 Pisces. Saturn will spend about 4 months retrograde, so his indications will be a bit muted during that time. If you want more information about Saturn in Pisces and its meanings, you can watch the video I released earlier this year, which is viewable on Patreon and on my YouTube channel. Generally, Saturn in Pisces, among other things, brings problems related to water, either too much water or insufficient water. These issues lose definition and lose urgency temporarily while Saturn is retrograde. So in that sense, it actually could be perhaps a more positive period. In week 3, we will also get a new moon. This is going to be on June 17th. This new moon is at 26 Gemini, ruled by Mercury in Gemini, who makes a close square to Saturn. It's a very communicative and chatty 2 weeks, but with a heavy theme, symbolized by that overcoming square from Saturn. The topics in question for the next 2 weeks will relate to mercurial issues of business, schools, but also oppression and restriction, as those are Saturnian and are going to be part of that conversation. Again, I think a lot of this will manifest very visibly in the United States, which is a Gemini country, and I wonder if, along with other indications, we're going to get reports of heavy rain, storms, or flooding due to Saturn's square to Mercury. Week 4, June 19th, we'll get Jupiter at 7 Taurus sextile Saturn in Pisces. This is a very important aspect economically, even though it's just a sextile. And typically, this aspect is quite positive for the economy and for the stock market. It will persist over a number of months into early 2024, really going out of orb in August through October, but it's really going to be felt more or less for quite some time starting now. I discussed the importance of this aspect in my video on the economy for 2023 available to patrons, but in short, this aspect is a major reason I had an optimistic view of the economy in 2023 and early next year, unlike actually many commentators on the economy who I'm sure know a lot more about it than I do. June 21st, the Sun will enter Cancer, which is the summer solstice, and this really merits its own video, but the equinox and solstice charts, or cardinal ingress horoscopes, all indicate important events for a location or country based on where those charts are set for the upcoming 3 months, the summer season, or I guess winter season if you're in the southern hemisphere. It's an interesting chart for the US, where the Jupiter-Saturn sextile is very close and in the 9th and 7th houses, respectively, suggesting some kind of economic benefit from one's enemies or adversaries. There's much more to be said, including on the legal side, but it's a chart worth investigating, and so I'm hoping to do that in the coming weeks. Now, the final week of June, week 5, June 26th, we get Mars at 21 Leo square Uranus in Taurus. This is a really conflict-ridden combination that is highly volatile. My expectation would be for this to manifest in a violent way. The most high-profile conflict now, of course, is the Russian invasion of Ukraine, so I would expect this combination to lead to some drastic action in that war, but not only in that war, of course. Generally, this is not a safe aspect, and taking major risks around this date is going to be extra dangerous and unpredictable in its results. June 26th, Mercury will enter Cancer. Mercury leaves his domicile and enters one of the mute signs, so his expression now comes through nonverbal means. Images and moving images are especially powerful with Mercury in the lunar sign, so I would recommend deploying nonverbal means of communication for maximum effect. If you're doing presentations, if you're showing things, really showing, not telling is going to be very good now. June 30th, Mercury direct will conjoin the Sun at 9 Cancer. This is a so-called superior conjunction because Mercury is direct. This is the start of the synodic cycle of Mercury and the Sun and represents a moment when Mercury becomes an occidental planet rising after the Sun. Given Mercury's placement in a mute sign, Cancer, all the water signs are considered mute, it is now a very reticent planet and speaks hardly at all, only in flashes of intuition or dreams rather than through verbal communication. So Mercury becomes very hidden, very mysterious, very shy in a way. So to summarize, June is going to be considerably more positive than May, and I think it's going to be one of the best, if not the best month of the year economically. On a personal level, we're going to be now in a more exploratory and communicative mode. We're going to be sharing information rather than in a combative place. If you haven't yet seen my whole year 2023 forecast video to get the larger picture, check it out. It's on Patreon, it's on my YouTube channel, and you can always subscribe to the Nina Gryphon channel on YouTube as well. Thanks for watching. I'm Nina Gryphon, and this is the Astrology and Magic channel.